Sands of Oblivion is a 2007 made-for sci-fi channel movie directed by David Flores. It has a pretty good cast headed up by Monica Baccarin, who you may know from the Deadpool movies, Victor Webster, who you may know from the Mutant X TV show, and even some veteran actors including George Kennedy, Richard Kynes, and you've also got a role for genre favourite Adam Baldwin as well. Now this came out in 2007, which was a year before the final Brendan Fraser Mummy film came out, so I suspect this was made when that film went into production to try and, you know, carry on the hype really, and get on the hype train for that particular movie. So, what's this one all about? It's for a Sci-Fi Channel TV movie. It's quite ambitious in some ways. It focuses on 3 time periods actually. Initially we have ancient Egypt that shows you this kind of this curse effectively that is you know, magical and everything, and we have this amulet which is effectively a way to ward off this kind of particular kind of evil god or what have you. Then we have a section in the 1920s, and there is a Hollywood production that is making a movie set in Egypt, and they have imported Egyptian artifacts to be used in the film, and this amulet gets kind of mixed up in it all and ends up in this movie's production. But because a lot of this stuff is cursed, you know, it is effectively buried. Quite literally, the sets are buried. And then we cut to modern times, aka 2007, and we have an archaeologist trying to find this buried film set of this, and they're not expecting to come across genuine Egyptian artifacts, and even in the kind of the stuff which has been remade, it's been quite painstakingly recreated, and things like the hieroglyphics and all that have been painstakingly recreated, and the meanings are all there and everything. And then we have this kind of this effectively Egyptian entity, deity, whatever you want to call it, come back to life in modern California and wreak havoc on this team of archaeologists and people associated with them. So what will happen? You have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. As I've said, I do think this is somewhat of an ambitious movie for the Sci-Fi Channel. And it ends up being running away from the monster towards the end of the film. But certainly in the first half of this movie, it has a kind of Indiana Jones feel to it to a large degree, which of course, arguably, the Brendan Fraser Mummy films had that kind of reputation. So I think it's clear where the influences come from, but nonetheless it is what it is. I do feel that there is quite a lot of mythology in this movie, and you know, as such, certainly the first half, it has an interesting, you know, storyline where it's spanning the kind of across different countries, across different time periods, and it's quite a fun idea that we have this archaeological dig in California, but it's actually kind of finding Egyptian artifacts. I mean, they've used that kind of we had all this stuff imported in the 1920s and that all got buried as a conceit to have this expedition, so to speak. But for movie logic and for a Sci-Fi Channel film, it's fine, I would say. The other thing I would say is they have this practical VFX suit of this Egyptian deity. Looks a little bit like Anubis. They call it the left hand of Set, and it's this kind of jackal-like, huge kind of humanoid creature with a kind of like a decaying face. Practically realised. I thought it was pretty solid. It's got, you know, it's got moving bits on its face so it can have a little bit of an expression. So I thought that was pretty solid, to be honest. Again, for the level of movie that this actually is. And as I've mentioned, I think there's some reasonable cast here. I mean, some of these people like Morena Baccarin weren't particularly that well known back in 2007, and they've kind of garnered more fame in modern years. But nonetheless, you know, it is still quite a impressive cast here. I mean, some of the casts aren't on screen for a long time, but you know, it's nonetheless a pretty good list for a made-for-TV movie. One of the things I did like about this movie is the Adam Baldwin character, who is the kind of the ex-husband of Morena Baccarin. And why I liked him, his character seemed a little bit more nuanced than maybe the rest of them. You know, he's painted to be an adulterer, and you know, he's kind of jealous of his ex-wife's new romance with Victor Webster's character. But I didn't think, at least initially, he seemed like he was a villain. And he just seemed like a more of a guy who was kind of jilted to a certain degree, or, you know, he's not a perfect human being in any sense, but he feels a little bit more nuanced. I thought he's, you know, there are times he's trying to do the kind of the right thing. There are times he's kind of more of an a-hole. But I thought his character stood out to me because, at least initially, he was, I think, the most interesting character in the film, because he was, in a way, the most flawed and therefore the most grounded. You'll notice I didn't talk much about the other characters, but we'll come on to them. And it's a relatively exciting movie. As the film goes into the second half, it's more running away from the monster and things like that. It loses some of the plot elements that were interesting in the first half, but it's still, you know, somewhat of a exciting movie if you don't mind, you know, car chases and CGI monsters and things like this. So what doesn't work in this movie, let's discuss. So I talked a little bit about Adam Baldwin's character, so let me just continue with him. He is the most interesting character, I think, but that's at a point in the movie, he just becomes like a standard human villain that these sci-fi movies often have. It's often a critique, I say, of these type of movies, and the asylum movies are the same, to not have the VFX on screen that much. They'll tend to have a human bad guy for our heroes to fight against, and thus, you know, negating the reason to have VFX footage on screen, because you're dealing with a human bad guy, which is much easier and cheaper to shoot. And when we get to that point, he kind of gets influenced by this kind of Egyptian deity. And then he just becomes like a silly human villain. But initially he was quite good. But what about the other characters? So the other main characters are the Victor Webster male lead and Morena Baccarin's kind of archaeologist. The issue I have with those two, so Morena Baccarin's character is the female lead, but she is just constantly getting like captured or kidnapped or held hostage in this movie. And the only other thing she's good for really is just giving exposition. So she's either captured or she's giving exposition. It's a really quite thankless role, to be honest with you. And the Victor Webster's character, he is just like your most vanilla, sort of typical action hero good guy. Oh, he's an ex-vet with a heart of gold, etc. No real kind of like character really, I didn't think. He just is like, you know, the good guy, etc. And he's just like ultimately quite dull when you compare him to Adam Baldwin's character and Adam Baldwin's performance, to be honest. So yeah, the characters aren't exactly stellar here, I would say. We were introduced to a smattering of other supporting characters that come in and out, and they're of varying quality. So I mentioned I quite like this kind of the practical effects of our monster, but the film also has CGI 2007 era sci-fi CGI effects, and they ain't good. You know, we get CGI giant snakes, CGI locusts, at even one point we have the hieroglyphics coming to life as kind of like cartoon characters in a scene and fighting our heroes. Yes, really, that happens. And the CGI is exactly like you think. It's 2007 era, sci-fi channel, TV movie budget CGI. It does not look good. You know, there it is. And then the actual kind of plot itself, as I say, I think there was some interesting stuff initially, because I think the setup of the movie is actually a little bit absurd, but it's quite fun if you like it, sort of a silly adventure film. But then we just get to the latter half and it's just standard, you know, paint by numbers TV movie affair, really, and it really isn't that particularly kind of interesting. It has certainly a cheaper look, certainly, but it's ultimately very typical of your kind of sci-fi movie channel style films in many ways, particularly in that kind of that second half of the film. But overall, I do think it's somewhat watchable, especially if you don't mind a B movie. I think there's some interesting ideas. The cast, I think, is fun to watch. I'll give this one a 5 out of 10. It's not high art. It really isn't. But it has some entertainment value. Have you seen it? What did you think? Please leave me a comment. And it's a 5 out of 10 for me.